Welcome to this edition of Go Vote Omaha, presented by the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha. I'm Cindy Maxwell-Ostdiek, Director of Public Policy with the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha, and I'll be our facilitator for tonight's conversation. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization and does not endorse political candidates or parties. Our purpose is to empower voters and defend democracy. Go Vote Omaha focuses on policy issues, and the views expressed at this educational event are not necessarily aligned with those of the League of Women Voters, but are expressed at the discretion of our guests. Today, we will hear from 4 ballot measure campaigns that were on Nebraskans' ballots in November. Our objective is for Nebraskans to hear about issues and policies directly from these organizations in a nonpartisan environment. The format for today is as follows. Each campaign representative will get a 1-minute opening statement, followed by questions prepared by the League of Women Voters. Each representative will answer every question and will have up to 45 seconds to answer. And following the question portion, each representative will have 1-minute closing statement. We alternate speaking order throughout the forum. Before the forum, the representatives drew numbers to determine the initial speaking order. I will introduce them now in that order. And the 4 representatives for the ballot measure campaigns are Noel Tonninges with Nebraska Appleseed, and Sandy Danek, Nebraska Right to Life, Crista Eggers, Rebecca Firestone, Support Our Schools Nebraska, and Crista Eggers with Nebraskans for Medical Marijuana. We wanted to make sure and start with opening statements, and so we will start with you first, Noel. Thank you.
Hi. Good to go. I'm Noel Tonninges. I am a campaigns organizer with Nebraska Appleseed, and we worked really closely on the paid sick leave for Nebraskans ballot measure this last election cycle. Paid sick leave for Nebraskans was a ballot initiative that we took to ballot to ensure that all working Nebraskans were earning and eligible for paid sick leave in their workplace. Prior to this initiative, there were no laws that guaranteed all workers were eligible for paid sick leave in their workplace. We wanted to ensure that all folks who are working right now are eligible to take the time to heal from sickness and take care of their loved ones. With overwhelming support from across the state of Nebraska, we found that voters wanted paid sick leave in their workplaces and are eager to have this as a policy that will benefit all of us.
Thank you. Sandy?
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate being here. I am the Executive Director of Nebraska Right to Life, and our initiative 434 was brought about in answer to 439, which was an initiative that would further reproductive rights. And our initiative essentially protects a child in the womb in the 2nd and 3rd trimesters. So it gave us an ability to reach out to pro-life Nebraskans and educate on the issues of the child in the womb, in addition to the resources that we can provide women when they're in an unplanned pregnancy. It was a unique ballot initiative in that they were competing, and that is the first in our history within the state.
Rebecca?
Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. I'm Rebecca Firestone here on behalf of the Support Our Schools Nebraska campaign. We were a little bit different than some of the other measures that were on the ballot in that Measure 435 was a referendum to repeal an existing piece of legislation, which was LB 1402. So that made it a little different from the other ballot measures. Measure 435 was a private education scholarship referendum to repeal LB 1402, which was a $10 million program to establish private school vouchers to take money out of the state general funds and direct them to scholarships for private education, which is something where there's a fair amount of question about whether or not it's constitutional in the state. In the end, we ended up repealing that particular measure by a vote of 57% voting to repeal versus 42% voting to retain the measure, and we'll talk more about what that means.
And Crista?
Yeah, my name is Crista Eggers, and I'm with Nebraskans for Medical Marijuana. Our organization led the ballot initiatives 437 and 438 dealing with medical cannabis access in the state of Nebraska for patients. These were two statutory initiatives. The first one was the protections for patients and their caregivers when a health practitioner makes a recommendation based on their health condition for cannabis. And the second one, 438, was the regulatory body and how this will be implemented within the state. This effort has gone on for many, many years, and we've actually gone to the ballot or attempted to go to the ballot several times. We have heard from Nebraskans all across the state how important this is, and Nebraska has remained, up until this point, one of just a couple states that provides no medical cannabis access with either cannabis itself or the derivatives. So we had overwhelming support. Both of these initiatives pass, and we're really excited to see what this does for Nebraska patients.
Well, thank you. And we'll start with question number 1, and this is for Sandy to start. What was the motivation behind bringing your ballot initiative, amendment, or referendum to the people of Nebraska?
Well, the industry that supports abortion in our state began with Initiative 439, announced that in November, and we countered that with our own initiative, saying that we were going to give the pro-life community of the state an opportunity to support the pro-life position. We had concerns for the language that they had struck in 439, simply because it was so broadly stated that there was very little definition and very little scrutiny for what might happen if it were to pass. And so our concerns came from what would it do if it were to pass, and what would that mean?
Rebecca?
Measure 435 was a result of almost a couple of years of work with initially these types of private school vouchers being passed in the legislature for the first time in 2023, which is something that had not happened in Nebraska up until that point. There was an effort in the summer of 2023 to repeal another measure, LB 753, which was the first private school voucher program passed. The legislature in 2024 took some legislative measures to sunset LB 753, and they put a new program, LB 1402, in place. Again, another type of private school voucher. So then we collected signatures in the summer of 2024 to get the repeal of 1402 on the ballot.
Yeah, for Nebraskans for Medical Marijuana, the issue of medical cannabis access has been talked about since as early as 2015, when we attempted to work on legislative bills to pass something here for the patients in Nebraska. Ultimately, in 2020, the decision was made to go to the ballot, where we collected enough signatures, but later were tossed from the ballot on a single subject technicality under the Supreme Court's ruling. We came back in 2022 and continued collecting more signatures. And then in 2024, we brought these two statutory initiatives before voters. Again, the reason that we have been pushing for this is the lack of being able to get something done any other way, and believing that the support of Nebraskans, which has been about 70% support for a medical cannabis program, we wanted to make sure voters had the opportunity to vote.
Noel?
Yeah, paid sick leave for Nebraskans was an issue brought by workers for workers. This started in meatpacking plants, daycares, restaurants, and broad industries that are historically without benefits like paid sick leave. It was through conversations with these workers that we found a deep need to bring legislation to protect paid sick leave for all workers. We found that nearly 33% of all full-time workers in Nebraska were without any sort of paid sick leave, and almost 85% of part-time workers are without paid sick leave in Nebraska. These are huge gaps that mean that employees are not allowed to take time off to care for loved ones, including parents, children, and other family. It also means that they're not able to take time off to recover from sickness or injury themselves. So we knew that this was necessary and would better Nebraskans' lives.
Thank you. So the second question, we'll start with Rebecca, is to ask, how did you choose what language to use in your initiative, amendment, or referendum, and why was that important specifically?
That's a great question. So we were working to repeal this existing piece of legislation, so we needed to make sure that the language that ended up on the ballot was very clear that we were asking for a repeal of LB 1402, which had a very specific definition of what a private school scholarship looked like. So we worked with legal support in order to develop that language and make clear to make clear to voters what they were being asked to vote on.
Thank you.
Yeah, for medical cannabis, we in 2020, as I shared, had a single subject ruling that did not allow us to be on the ballot. So when we wrote our new language, we decided to go with 2 statutory initiatives, breaking the 2 issues into separate initiatives. And the first one, again, dealing very much with patients and the protection of patients, caregivers, and healthcare professionals that will be making these recommendations. The second initiative, dealing with the regulations, was really drafted so that we can make sure to have a safe and regulated system. We want cannabis to be accessible to the patients who need it, but we want to make sure that it is safe, that it is tested, that there is oversight, so it helps the patients that need it and keeps Nebraska, safe as a whole.
Yeah, we chose to take paid sick leave from a really broad angle because we had experienced such scrutiny in the legislature where previous paid sick leave policies brought through traditional session had been essentially gutted and made somewhat unusable by Nebraskan workers and inevitably unsuccessful. Our language guarantees 5 days of paid sick leave for small businesses and 7 days of paid sick leave for large businesses. We wanted to ensure that we were both protecting the needs of employees in Nebraska, but also protecting the businesses who employ these folks. We knew that marrying the 2 ideas, the needs of the workers and the needs of the employers, was super important to ensure that this was a policy that was successful and had longevity in Nebraska.
Sandy?
The competing measure 439 had language in where they spoke of health. And in it, it said that an abortion could be performed up until fetal viability unless it were for the health of the patient. The problem with that language then meant that it could be performed for any reason. And it would be under the scrutiny of the abortionist performing the procedure that would make that determination. So 434, the pro-life initiative, was developed to protect a child in the womb in the 2nd and 3rd trimesters, so that if 439 were to pass, we wouldn't be a late-term abortion state.
So our next question, we'll start with Crista, is to ask what the process of collecting signatures was like for you. Who all was involved in the collection?
Yeah, so Nebraskans for Medical Marijuana has been a very grassroots effort. We started with supporters across the state that were volunteers, amazing individuals, many of them patients themselves, who went out and volunteered to collect signatures in their communities. Once we had fundraised a small portion of money, we were able to also bring in help to collect those signatures. But essentially, we went across the state and talked with individuals, heard stories from people who are very, very passionate about this issue, and there was a ripple effect in the collection of signatures.
Noel?
Yeah. Once again, paid sick leave for Nebraskans was brought by workers for workers. This issue started in businesses big and large, from Omaha to central Nebraska all the way out to Scotts Bluff, with workers having conversations, talking about the need for paid sick leave, and then inevitably us bringing this to petition. We are a coalition of nonprofits and local organizers who work to gather signatures for a little over a year across the state of Nebraska, doing a large part of our collection in Omaha and Lincoln, bringing awareness about this issue, and then bringing that across the state until we inevitably turned in all of our signatures last summer.
Sandy?
Nebraska Right to Life is an organization that was in coalition with other organizations. So Nebraska Family Alliance, Nebraska Catholic Conference, and Susan B. Anthony joined in that effort. Our particular organization has been in existence for more than 50 years, so our grassroots support is very strong. So in coalition together, we had chapters where our people came forward, but we also had people who cared about the cause, came forward to say, I want to work in this. So we saw people that we've worked with for a number of years, and we saw many, many new faces because they had a commitment and a purpose to this cause.
Okay.
So Nebraskans love their schools, which is what really motivated this particular ballot measure. And we worked so the Support Our Schools Nebraska campaign was a coalition of a variety of different organizations that are dedicated to supporting public education in the state of Nebraska. We had a tremendous grassroots motivation by teachers, both current teachers as well as retired teachers, out working across the state of Nebraska to collect signatures and coordination with the other community members who really just believe in their schools and want to make sure that funding for the schools in our state remains robust, predictable, and sustainable. We ended up having to collect signatures, as I said before, twice in the summer of 2023 and then again in the summer of 2024 as a result of legislative action. But each of those times, we just saw really a tremendous groundswell of support for our schools.
Thank you. And then this next question, we would start, of course, with Sandy. What was the outcome of the election for your campaign, and what does that mean for Nebraskans?
The 434 passed, and it passed quite handily. It was 52% supported the effort, and we won essentially all counties except for Lancaster and Sarpy County. So it was a tremendous groundswell of support. We often say Nebraska is a pro-life state, and largely that is due to this effort. When you can see that this passed with tremendous support, in addition to our legislature being predominantly pro-life and our elected officials federally as well being pro-life. So we enjoy a tremendous amount of support and appreciate the effort of everyone who supported 434.
So Measure 435 passed by about 57%. And we knew that if we were on the ballot and could stay on the ballot, that we were likely to be successful, because every time that the issue of private school vouchers has been on the ballot previously in Nebraska, as well as in other states, basically vouchers have failed because there is very strong support for ensuring public funding for public schools. What this means is that the $10 million appropriation in fiscal year 2025 that was directed to go to private school scholarships, that program is ended and the funds are now going back to the general fund, and the legislature is now taking up another budget in another legislative cycle.
Yeah, with the passing of 437 and 438, we saw overwhelming support from Nebraskans, which we are very confident if we were on the ballot, stayed on the ballot, that we would see that support. 437, the patient protections passed by 71%. Every legislative district in the state voted in support. 438, the regulatory process, lagged by a couple points at 68%. What this means for Nebraskans is I truly believe their voice has been heard on an issue that is very important to them. As an organization, we have dedicated ourselves to make sure that patients have access to a safe and regulated medical cannabis program. And there are so many patients in this state that are currently hurting and do not have the option because of where they live. And we're very, very excited that they will have this option.
Paid sick leave for Nebraskans won by one of the largest margins our coalition has ever seen. Paid sick leave for Nebraskans passed with 75% of support from the broader electorate across Nebraska. This includes overwhelming support from areas like Omaha, Lincoln, but across greater Nebraska as well in every region. And this is really because paid sick leave is an issue that touches every single Nebraskan, whether you are working or the child of someone who is working or the parent of someone who is working. Paid sick leave allows you to take the time you need to care for your loved ones when it's most important. It protects our employees. It brings folks to Nebraska because they know that this is a guaranteed protection in the workplace. It also helps improve workplace productivity and incentivizes workers to continue to show up and support our Nebraskan economy.
And I apologize, I think I messed up the order with this last one. And so Rebecca, what is the time frame for rollout of the passed policy? And what else may need to happen for the rollout to be effective?
So basically with the results of the election being certified, the repeal of this program under LB 1402 goes into effect. So those, as said before, the $10 million that was appropriated for that program is going back into the general fund. And that's it in terms of implementation. So now what we're looking at going forwards is we're expecting continued debate in the legislature about how we fund our schools, how we make sure that funding is sustainable and equitable and balanced with the needs of property owners and how much we pay for property taxes. We're waiting to see if there's any new so-called school choice legislation around private school vouchers or charter schools that will end up being introduced in the next legislative session, but we're in a wait and see moment at this point in time.
So when the governor signed into law 437 and 438, 437 was designed to be self-enacting, and so currently patients do have the ability to have a recommendation made. However, the regulatory process sets up the Nebraska Medical Cannabis Commission, which is comprised of the 3 current Liquor Control Commission board members, with the additional 2 members that the governor could choose to appoint. This will be the regulatory body that sets up the rules and regulations, and that body will implement these rules and regs by July 1st of this year. And on or before October 1st of this year, we will begin seeing the industry that will be providing the medical cannabis to patients emerge.
Our paid sick leave policy will go into effect October 1st of this year. This was done in part to both support the outcome of this election and also ensure that businesses had the chance to establish and implement all of these paid sick leave policies. Notice will be provided to businesses to let them know that they must establish paid sick leave policies for eligible employees, and that workers must begin accruing and have the option of using paid sick leave on October 1st of 2025.
434 has been implemented, and for the language and the purpose of the initiative, it's important for us to provide education. We are not certain what will happen in the legislature in terms of what will come from those who support abortion, but we will continue to educate, and I think that's on us to then provide not only what 434 does, but also offer support by way of resources to those women who may be in an unplanned pregnancy.
And so at this time, we'll do closing statements, starting with Crista, please.
So again, I love the opportunity to be here and share about our initiatives today. Nebraskans have for many, many years been passionate about the issue of medical cannabis access. Nebraska remains just one of, now it would be 48 states. We have joined 48 other states in the nation that have some form of medical access for patients with certain ailments. This has been a very personal journey for many, many individuals who have begun advocating on behalf of their loved ones. This was very led by the people, for the people. And moving forward, we just truly believe that patients having this as an option to talk with their caregiver, the individual that is guiding their health care, that this option will provide better care. It will create a healthier Nebraska, and patients will have an option that when traditional treatments have failed them, this will be something they can talk with their doctor about.
Again, yeah, I'll echo what's already been said, but thank you so much for having us here today. Like I've said before, paid sick leave was a policy brought by workers for workers and touches every person in Nebraska. Paid sick leave already has in many other states, but now in Nebraska will improve the health care and health outcomes of all employees in Nebraska. It'll improve workplace productivity, worker satisfaction. It'll ensure that children are able to get to the doctor appropriately. It'll ensure that employees are able to recover from injury when necessary. And we thank all of the voters. We thank the 75% of the Nebraska voting electorate who voted to pass and support paid sick leave for Nebraskans. This was a huge win for labor rights here in Nebraska. And we know that we will continue to see progress. We will continue to make Nebraska a desirable place to work and grow our economy by supporting our workers and making our Nebraskan workplaces stronger and healthier.
In our country, we saw 10 ballot initiatives that was to bring about abortion, and it would be abortion on demand up until full term. So that brought to us a very serious concern that language, should 439 had passed, would take away parental notification. It would, as I said earlier, put a health exception in place that would be under the scrutiny of the abortionist. He would determine if the health reason was necessary for an abortion to be performed up until birth. It also had language in it stating that there would be no state interference, which means safeguards could be in question, and past legislation that had passed to protect our pro-life issue could be in jeopardy. So 434 gave the pro-life people of Nebraska an opportunity to say that we wanted to protect a child in the womb, especially in the later term, because of the language of 439 threatening us that late-term abortion could be realized in our state.
So thank you again for the opportunity to be here today. It was really appreciate the chance to talk about the Support Our Schools campaign. We are, as I said before, we are waiting to see what additional private school voucher or charter legislation may be introduced in the state, but also have a lot of opportunity to continue to be talking with Nebraskans about how to shore up and support our schools, which are really the heartbeat of so many of our communities. So we're so appreciative of the Nebraska voters who voted to repeal LB 1402 and are looking for opportunities to continue to talk with Nebraskans about how we shore up funding for our schools to make sure that we're on track to close the opportunity gap, but also to make sure that our schools are funded in a robust and sustainable manner. We've seen in a number of states where private school vouchers have come online that they have become absolute budget busters that are really difficult for states to avoid, to be able to pay for, and that is something that we want to avoid in the state of Nebraska while we do work on continuing to fund our public schools.
Thank you for joining us tonight. We want to make sure and thank the campaign representatives who participated in our conversation. And again, the views expressed tonight have been at the discretion of our guests and don't necessarily represent the views of the League of Women Voters. And for the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha, I'm Cindy Maxwell-Ostdiek, and we always urge you to be informed and go vote Omaha.